Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Admiral Rogers, I have a question. You said earlier that Russia is a peer competitor in terms of our cyber technology and the cyber threats that are out there, and I guess I'm interested to see what your perspective is. I'm just sitting here and I've been watching through the course of this hearing the Russian bombers that let loose today in Syria with 1 hour notice to our generals in Baghdad and striking non-ISIS targets. And I think this is a reprehensible activity that's happening today. And I have many questions as to how we ended up here. But I'm curious from you, with this development today of an over-aggressive Russia, how in the world do we go forward with talking about peer competitors and sharing intel information and trusting anything that comes from Putin and Russia?
Well, clearly your point is much broader than the cyber arena that I'm particularly...
I think it's completely related.
Okay, I didn't say it was unrelated. I said it was broader. One of the points I try to make is you have to remember that cyber happens in a broader strategic context, so it's important that we understand the broader strategic context.
Would there not be an element of trust that would have to prevail here when we just literally saw what happened this morning? And for many of us that have sat here on this committee for a long time, saw a red line that was violated and not upheld in Syria. We've seen all these different gaps with all these different countries around the world with an administration that seems to not have any kind of a strategy or a contiguous plan. How would we take a step forward today? I know you're looking at the broad context, you're talking about the broad context, but I don't understand the gap that's going to be there, that's already been there, but the gap that's going to continue to emerge today. How in the world do we breach that? And how in the world do we say to the American people, with all seriousness and looking our constituents in the eyes, that we have their back and that we're looking out for the security of the United States of America and our allies, and we're watching Vladimir Putin come right into the Middle East, right next to our cohort and friend that we want to protect, Israel? Does that not change the equation of trusting or having any kind of semblance of trust with Putin and Russia?
Well, I'd only argue this latest issue fits in a broader context with the Ukraine and others. This is not a new phenomenon in many ways with this particular actor. It's why we've been very direct with them. I know the Secretary has had conversations with his counterparts in the Russian framework. I have not had specific cyber discussions with them. I will say one of the points I try to make in our internal discussions is I'm watching the Russians use cyber in an ever increasingly aggressive way.
And would this not be a major alarm? This is alarming to me that he just talked to the President yesterday and evidently said, stay out of our airspace. When we get 1 hour of warning and they go in and they attack Syria. So now they are a mainstay player as we're screwing around in our country. We're fighting back and forth over all kinds of things right now. We just had the Pope here, and while America's distraction focuses over here, it's seemingly that he's using a phenomenal window of opportunity to go and be in another major push now in Syria. And the alarm, I think, not only for lawmakers today, but for citizens of our country that we're vowing to protect, is we have now watched him establish himself in Syria, in the Middle East.
Obviously, as outlined by President Putin, he believes he is following his national interests. We are alarmed by what happened this morning. What was agreed by the two presidents is that our militaries would talk so that we would deconflict operations.
So have we not seen a failure between our president and President Putin if we were going to talk and try to avoid something like this? Because now he's there, 1 hour of notice with all of our forces over there, the allied forces, the NATO forces, the other nations that are fighting as well. I mean, would we not see this as a failure?
I don't believe it's a failure. I believe it's an aggressive action by Russia right now in advance of our discussions between our two militaries.
And are you confident that we have a strategy with the President of the United States that just met with Putin? Are you confident that those two leaders have a strategy and that we're holding up our end of the bargain? Are you confident that the administration is looking at this as, oh, well, we expected this to happen? I mean, I look at it as a gigantic breach because I represent 750,000 people that are looking at their TVs right now like I am, and the official response from the Pentagon, taken aback by strikes. I think we're all taken aback. Is there a strategy that was supposed to prevent this? Or is our attitude now, well, we know they're going to go do their things, we're just going to see at what point we're going to try to contain them?
We have a disagreement on strategy. They want to be able to do military action first, followed by a political agreement.
They're doing military action. They've been doing military action. They can crush on the Ukraine. They're making headway through that whole Eastern European area. They've been doing military action, and today we're watching a live bombing. And from your perspective and the perspective of the administration, we expected that. The American people, I don't expect that.
The Russians made clear that they would support the Assad regime with airstrikes, and we made an agreement to have our militaries talk so that there would not be any problem between our interactions between our
Do
forces.
you think 1 hour of notice
No,
is legitimate for two organizations and militaries that are talking? They obviously, talks broke down and we got a last minute. So what is our response now?
Well, you have me at a disadvantage, Congresswoman. I don't know exactly what has happened over the last hour. We heard about the attacks this morning. They asked us to avoid the area where they would be operating. We continue to fly throughout Syria.
And we continue to talk? Are we continuing to talk to our Russian counteropponents?
We have agreed for our militaries to meet, and that meeting just simply has not occurred. This was an agreement between the two presidents just a couple days ago. So we are trying to find out where we will meet, where it will be,
Would you not agree this is a crisis? Because for the first time, they have now entered the Middle East, and for the first time, we now have watched the broadening of Putin's powers, who is just here on the American soil, right next to a mess, a hotbed of war, and right next to our dear ally, Israel. Have we not now watched something elevate to the point that this is now a crisis? Because Russia has just now gone from their position through the Ukraine, looking at Eastern Europe, and now has sufficiently landed themselves with a coalition inside of Syria.
I do not believe it's a crisis. I believe it's a disagreement in strategy, and that is what we're trying to work out.
And I respect that. I believe it is a crisis. I believe we've had a president with no foreign policy whatsoever. We've had red lines talked about and crossed, and this thing has played out all by itself. And now today, here we are, back in a crisis, back on TV in front of every single American, wondering who in the world is defending our country. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
And thank you.